Hello students, how are you all? I hope you're all doing very good and taking a very good care of your health as well. So this is Monica Kumar and this video is meant for the students of class 12 who will be appearing in the English Core Board exam going to be conducted by the CBSE. Now children, if you really want to get the feel of a classroom teaching, then stay with me till the end of this video. So today I will be doing the first poem of the poetry section of Flamingo, the textbook for class 12 by NCERT. And the name of the poem is My Mother at 66 by Kamala Das. And in this video, I will be explaining you the About the Poet section of the poem, and I'll also be doing the paraphrasing of the entire poem for you. So here we go. But before I go on to explain you the poem, it is very important for us to get acquainted with some information about Kamala Das. So I have written some bullet points for you here, which I have picked up from the About the Poet section of your book, and I have also added some more information to it. So who is Kamala Das? Well, Kamala Das is India's foremost poets in English, and she is one of the greatest literary figures in Malayalam. She wrote in English as well as in Malayalam under the pen name Madhavi Kuti. She was born in 1934 in Malabar, Kerala, and she died in 2009 in Pune. So children, whenever we talk about Kerala, we are reminded of its marvelous landscape. The backwaters where we go cruising, the palm-lined beaches and the lush green gardens. Oh my God, the beauty is immense. For those of you who have visited Kerala, you know what I'm talking about. So she hails from such a beautiful landscape. Okay, so coming back to Kamala Das. Do you know that she started writing poetry at a very early age in her life? Of course, she inherited this legacy from her parents, who too had a literary background. For that matter, her mother was a notable poet of her times and her father was a journalist. Now, it is mentioned in the About the Author section that her works are known for their originality, versatility, and the indigenous flavor of the soil. Now, let me explain you all these three. Originality, which means that her works were her independent creations. Versatility, which means that she was a versatile writer who embraced a variety of subjects to write on. Indigenous flavor of the soil, which means that her works reflected the flavor of the native soil. In addition to all this, it is also written that some of her famous works are Alphabet of Lust 1977, Padmavati, the Harlot and Other Stories 1992, and in addition to this, she has also written 5 volumes of poetry. And she is also the recipient of many prestigious awards. Kamala Das is a sensitive writer who is skilled at capturing the enormously complex relationships in words. And one such relationship is the relationship between a mother and a daughter. So beautiful, so deep, so strong, and yet so complex. But why? Why is it called a complex relationship? Well, we all know that every daughter has to leave her parents behind in order to begin the journey of a new life ahead. But even when she goes away, She worries about her parents and she prays for their welfare. In My Mother at 66, Kamala Das has given us an insight into her personal life where she has celebrated the beautiful and loving bond that she shares with her mother, and has also expressed indirectly her inability to stay with her mother and look after her in her old age when she needed her the most. And it is because of this reason that this poem is also recognized as one of her confessional poems. Now, Kamala Das was also very good at creating images which were bold as well as beautiful. Now, a very universal theme runs throughout the poem, which is aging and the fear of loss and separation from our dear ones. Now, talking about the rhyme scheme, well, there is no identifiable rhyme scheme of the poem. And such poems which do not carry a rhyme scheme or rhythm are said to be written in free verse. If we talk about the mood of the poem, then obviously, because we are talking of the separation between the mother and the daughter, the mood is sad, sorrowful, and pensive. In fact, it is said that most of Kamala Das's poems carry the mood of a lonesome heart. My Mother at 66 is a lyrical idiom which is written in a single sentence punctuated by commas, but there is no full stop at the end of the sentence. So, in a way, it is like a strain of thought that flows unremittingly throughout the poem, and our eyes hop from one phrase to the other, trying to understand the thought. So, isn't it amazing that Kamala Das was able to create a plethora of feelings and emotions in a single sentence? So now, coming back to the poem, I have written the first few lines of the poem here for you, and I will paraphrase these lines as well. But before that, I would like to read through these lines once for you. So here we go. Driving from my parents' home to Cochin last Friday morning, I saw my mother beside me, doze, open-mouthed, her face ashen like that of a corpse, and realized with pain that she was as old as she looked but soon. So the very opening segment of this poem indicates that Kamala Das had probably come to her parents' home for a holiday and is now driving back to the Cochin airport to take a flight back to her destination. It is a Friday morning and her mother is sitting beside her in the car that she is driving. When the author glances at her mother, she notices that her mother has fallen asleep with her mouth open, suggested by the words doze, which means a short sleep, and or a nap, and open-mouthed. Now, this is a condition where the older people leave their mouths open while sleeping, as if to be breathing through the mouth as well. Now, this could be probably due to some nasal obstruction. And I would like to explain you last Friday here, which suggests that this poem was written 1 week after this episode took place. So the lines further read, her face ashen like that of a corpse. So when she has a closer look at her mother, she notices that her mother looks very pale and dull, carrying the smoky and the silvery tinge of ash. Now we all know what ash signifies. Well, it signifies the end of life and death. And here it means the paleness of the mother's face, suggested by the color of the ash. It is at this moment that Kamala Das compares the pale and the dull face of her mother to the lifeless face of a corpse. Corpse, which means a dead body. So we identify the poetic device, a simile employed by the author here, where she has drawn a comparison between the dull and the pale face of the mother and the lifeless face of a dead body with the usage of the word like. So it is a simile. The lines further read, and realized with pain that she was as old as she looked but soon. So when she looks at her mother, she feels that her mother looks exactly as an old woman of 66 would look. And at this point of time, a sudden realization dawns upon her that her mother has reached the fag end of her life and is standing at death's door. She is horrified by these unpleasant and painful thoughts, and she tries to dispel them immediately. The words "but soon" suggest immediately. Now, before I paraphrase the further lines, I would like to get back to the poetic device employed by the poet. Now, don't you think by comparing her mother's pale and dull face to a dead body, she has created a very morbid and gloomy image of her mother who is still alive. And therefore, this is a very bold image created by her. But then, Kamala Das was known for painting these bold images. So these are the further lines of the poem, and I'm going to read them out to you once. So here we go. Put that thought away and looked out at young trees sprinting, the merry children spilling out of their homes. But after the airport security check, standing a few yards away, I looked again at her, wan, pale as a late winter's moon, and felt that old familiar ache, my childhood's fear. So we have already learned that when the unpleasant and the painful thoughts of her mother's approaching death visit the mind of the poet, she tries to dispel them immediately. But how does she do it? So here she resorts to escapism. So how does she escape? She escapes by looking out of the window and sees trees sprinting, the merry children spilling out of their homes. So we find these two beautiful images created by the poet, which definitely lighten the otherwise serious tone of the poem. So let's understand these images. Now, what do you mean by sprinting? Sprinting means running. And we all know that a fast runner is called a sprinter. So, do you think that the trees are actually running? No. So, we identify the poetic device of personification employed by the poet here, where trees have been lent human form such that they are found to be running. But the actual scientific reason behind it we all know about, and which is that when we are in a moving vehicle and we look out of the window of the vehicle, all the objects outside appear to be moving in the opposite direction. Now we move on to the next image created by her. The word merry means happy. And the word spilling is generally associated with liquids like liquids spill, water spills, milk spills, kerosene spills. But here it refers to the movement and the spreading out of the children in large numbers. So we identify the poetic device of metaphor employed by the poetess here. Now, if we look at these images in depth, we find that these two images serve a stark contrast to the atmosphere within the car. Let's see how. Now, trees and children represent life, youth, energy, and exuberance, whereas the mother inside the car represents old age, inactivity, death, and decay. So the next lines read, "But after the airport security check, standing a few yards away, I looked again at her, worn, pale as the late winter's moon." Now we understand from here that the journey by car ends and the mother and the daughter reach the airport. Now the moment we talk about the airport, we are reminded of the busyness of the place, with hundreds of passengers fulfilling all the formalities at the time of departure and at the time of arrival. Likewise, even the poet gets busy fulfilling all the formalities within the airport, and when she finishes with the security check, she throws one last glance at her mother. And she is once again taken aback by the dull and the pale visage of her mother. And it is here that she compares the face of her mother to a late winter's moon. Now, what is this winter's moon? So we all know that winter marks the end of the cycle of seasons. And the moon during this time loses its luster and brightness, and generally it appears to be hazy and unclear because it is hidden behind the clouds, mist, or fog. So we once again identify the poetic device of simile employed by the poet here, where she compares the face of the mother to a late winter's moon. The lines further read, "And felt that old familiar ache, my childhood's fear." So the poet's heart once again gets gripped with the fear and grief of separation from her mother. And she realizes that she is familiar with this grief, which means that she is already acquainted with this grief because she used to experience this even in her childhood days. So we come to know from here that the poet had been harboring the feeling of losing her mother right from her childhood days. But now there is authenticity about this fear because her mother has grown old and her death is inevitable. And somewhere deep down her heart, the poet knows that if death comes to her mother, she would not be able to save her mother from its clutches. And now the last part of the poem, and the lines read as, "But all I said was, 'See you soon, Amma.' All I did was smile and smile and smile." So now we come to the most touching and the most poignant part of the poem, where the poet finally bids goodbye to her mother at the airport by saying, "See you soon, Amma," and by smiling at her continuously. So when she says, "See you soon, Amma," she reassures herself as well as her mother that they would meet again. And now the end lines, which say, "All I did was smile and smile and smile." In the first place, we identify the poetic device of repetition employed by the poet here, where she has used the word smile 3 times. Of course, these smiles were artificial, but by wearing these smiles, she was able to conceal all her fears and anxiety and the grief of separation from her mother. The smiles also had another purpose. By wearing those smiles, she wanted to leave her mother on a positive note. So this was all about the poem. I hope you have understood the poem in all its depth and intensity. But in case you have a doubt, please enter your queries in the comments section below. And if my video has served any purpose to you, please do press the like button and share it as much as you can. I would also request you to subscribe my channel so that I am able to apprise you with my latest videos. So that's all for now. Stay well, study well, and do well. Goodbye. This is Monica Kumar signing off.